Chronicles of Ardenthal. Episode 5. The First Scouts. The next morning, the castle woke early, but the way it woke had changed. There was no unrest breaking loose in raised voices, no visible panic moving through the corridors. Instead, a kind of concentration lay over everything, made up of many small movements. Doors were closed more quietly, conversations kept shorter, paths taken more directly. Everyone seemed to know that there were things now that had to be done, even if no one had yet named them aloud. Alina had risen before most of the others. She had not slept long, but the tiredness remained in the background. She did not go first to the writing room, but to the map room. The map still lay where she had left it the evening before. Serafina was not there. Light fell through the window and made the lines clearer than they had been by candlelight. Roads, rivers, villages, things one knew, as long as one did not have to leave them behind. Alina stepped closer and placed her hand beside the Arden River, not on it. With her eyes, she followed the roads east as far as they were marked on the map. After that, the drawing lost itself in rough lines and names that claimed more than they explained. She knew that maps did not lie, but she also knew that they did not say everything. The door opened softly. Serafina entered, already fully dressed, as if she had not begun the day but merely continued it.
"You are here early," she said. "I wanted to see what we know."
Serafina stepped beside her and looked down at the map as well.
"And? We know how to live here,"
Alina said.
"We do not know how to act there."
Serafina nodded. That is a beginning. A beginning. Not a plan, but enough not to stand still.
"I will not spend the whole day in the writing room,"
Alina said. Serafina looked at her without appearing surprised.
"What do you intend to do?"
"I want to see who moves," Alina answered calmly. "Who goes without being asked? Who returns without saying much? Who knows roads that are not on this map?" Serafina was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You will meet resistance. I already do." That was no exaggeration. The council had begun to ask questions that were not seeking answers, but boundaries. Serafina placed her hand on the table. "Do it quietly," she said. "Not because it is forbidden, because otherwise it will be stopped before it can grow." Alina nodded. She left the map room and went into the courtyard. Work had already begun. Men who were not at the front carried sacks, repaired wagons, checked tools. Women stood together in groups, not idle, but exchanging what needed to be known. They assigned tasks, organized routines, kept running what must not stop. Alina did not go to the loudest among them. She went to those who spoke without placing themselves at the center. At the well stood Mara of the Western Woods. She was not part of the court, but in recent days she had often come to hear news and carry it onward. Her eyes were alert, her movements purposeful. "You are here early," Mara said as Alina approached. "So are you." Mara shrugged. "Work does not wait." Alina looked at her. "You know the paths through the Western Woods?" It was not a question. Mara nodded slowly. "I know some. Also, the ones no map shows." Mara paused briefly. "I know some. Also the ones no map shows." "Why?" Alina did not evade the question. "Because we need more than news that comes to us." Mara looked at her for a moment, as if testing whether this was truly meant or merely some courtly phrasing. "You want to send someone," she said at last. "I want to know who can go." Mara glanced around, not from fear but from habit. "Many can go," she said. "Not many return." "I am not looking for many," Alina replied quietly. Mara nodded. Then do not speak first with those who look strong, she said. Speak with those who know when they have to disappear. Alina took in the sentence without commenting on it.
And you?
She asked. Mara did not smile.
I disappear when I must.
It was not a promise. But it was not a refusal either. Alina moved on. At the edge of the courtyard stood a young man she knew from the writing room. He had not written there, but waited. He had asked questions that were not loud, but precise. His name was Leo, and he came from a village near the eastern border.
You were not in the field?
Alina asked as she stepped up to him.
Not today.
Why? He hesitated briefly.
Because I wanted to see whether something changes.
And? It is changing, he said. Only not openly yet. Alina gave a faint nod.
You know the road east?
To a certain point, he replied. After that, it becomes unclear. Unclear is better than unknown. He looked at her. You want to send someone? It was not a question. It was a statement that had already begun to form in the courtyard, though no one had spoken it aloud. I want to know who knows the road, Alina said. Leo nodded slowly. Then speak with the traders too, he said. They go farther than we do, not out of courage, but out of necessity. Alina kept that in mind. She spent the morning listening. She asked questions that sounded simple, but were not accidental. She asked about paths, crossings, places where one could find water, stretches that should be avoided. She spoke with people who rarely stood at the center and knew more than they said for precisely that reason. No one called it a plan. No one called it preparation. Yet by the end of the day, Alina had something that was more than a thought. She had names. Not many, not loud ones, but clear ones. When she returned to the writing room that evening, new letters were already waiting. She sat down, took up the quill, and began to work as if nothing had changed. But as she wrote, she knew that she had taken the first step. Not east, but away from stillness. The next morning, no one spoke openly of what Alina had begun the previous day. There was no gathering, no announcement, no visible sign that anything had changed. And yet there was an attentiveness in the eyes of some people that had not been there before. Alina went to the writing room as usual, sat down, took the quill in hand, and began her work. She allowed herself time before opening the first letters, as if she had to take up the rhythm of the room again. The voices were low, the scratching of quills even, and for a moment one might have believed that everything remained as it had been. Around midday, she rose. I will come back later, she said to the lady beside her. It was not an unusual sentence. No one asked. Alina left the room and did not go into the courtyard, but through the side passage that led to the rear exits. The passage was narrower, used less often, and for that reason suited to things that were not meant to stand at the center. Mara was already waiting. She was not leaning against the wall, and she did not stand restlessly. She simply stood there, as if she had chosen the place because it was familiar to her. You are punctual, she said. I said I would come. Mara nodded and glanced briefly along the passage. You want to send someone? I want to see how far we can get without being seen, Alina said. Then we will not get far, Mara replied. Good. There was no disappointment in Alina's voice. It was a boundary. Leo stepped from the shadow as if he had waited for the conversation to begin. There was nothing striking about him, and that was exactly what made him suitable. He looked like someone who belonged wherever he stood. I will go as far as the old bridge, he said before Alina asked. After that, I turned back. Alina nodded. You will not go alone. Mara looked at him. I will accompany him part of the way, she said. Not to the bridge, only far enough to put him on the right path. Leo wanted to object, but did not. He understood that this was not about courage, but direction. Alina looked from one to the other.
You go today,
she said. No departure by night, no stories. You go like people who have something to do.
We do,
Mara said. Alina nodded.
When you return, I want to know where you could walk without being seen. I want to know where you were stopped without anyone speaking to you. And I want to know what you did not understand.
Leo looked at her briefly.
And if we see something we should not see?
Alina held his gaze.
Then you remember it,
she said. And you tell it here, not there. That was the boundary. No heroics, no risk beyond the purpose. Mara pushed away from the wall.
We will be back before sunset. If not,
Alina replied calmly,
I will not wait for you in the courtyard.
Mara did not smile.
You should not.
They left without looking back. Alina remained in the passage for a moment. She heard their steps until they faded. It was a quiet beginning, but it was movement. When she turned around, the master of stores stood at the end of the passage. He had not come loudly. He had not called out to her. He simply stood there and looked at her, as if he had chosen the moment when words could no longer be avoided.
You are not in the writing room, he said.
Not always, Alina answered. He stepped closer.
I was looking for you. Now you have found me.
He folded his hands behind his back. The council has assigned tasks. It will be wise for you to keep to them. I am keeping to them, Alina said calmly. I see it differently. A brief moment formed in which neither of them yielded. You are moving outside the structure, he continued. In times like these, that is not helpful. What is helpful? Alina asked. Order, he said. Clear responsibilities. Decisions that do not depend on individual people. Then make sure the decisions are made, Alina replied. The master of stores drew his brows together. That is not your task. Alina looked at him. What is my task? He answered at once. To calm the people, to lead the writing room, to hold order within.
I do that, she said. And everything else?
Alina took her time before answering.
Everything else happens anyway, she said at last.
With or without us? The master of stores shook his head. That is dangerous. Ignorance is more dangerous. He looked at her for a long time, as if deciding whether to continue or draw a boundary here. At last he said, if something goes wrong, they will hold you responsible. Then I should know what for, she replied calmly. He said nothing more. He turned and left. Alina remained still until his steps had faded. Then she returned to the writing room. The afternoon passed more slowly than usual. Alina wrote, read aloud, answered questions. She kept the room calm, though her thoughts returned again and again to the road Mara and Leo had taken. As the sun sank lower, she raised her eyes toward the door more often. She said nothing of it. No one asked. It was just before dusk when the door opened. Mara entered, followed by Leo. Both appeared unchanged. No blood, no visible traces of an incident. Yet their movements were more focused, as if they had brought back something that did not lie in their hands. Alina rose. Sit down. She waited until the other scribes had left the room or deliberately turned away. No one wanted to listen by accident. Mara began. As far as the old mill, everything is as usual, she said. The paths are clear. People work. No one asks questions. Leo nodded. After that, it changes, he added. There is more movement on the roads. Not only traders, groups that do not belong there. Armed? Alina asked. Partly, he said. Not openly. But one sees it. Mara continued. The bridge can still be crossed, but it is watched, not constantly. but often enough that one notices if one is paying attention. Alina nodded. And if one is not paying attention, then one notices too late, Mara said. A brief moment passed. How far could you go without drawing attention? Alina asked. Almost to the bridge, Leo replied. After that, we would have needed a reason. And if you had had one? Mara looked at her. Then we might have gone farther, she said. Or we might not have come back. Alina took that in without commenting. And what did you not understand? Leo hesitated. Why they are there, he said at last. It is not a good place for control. Too open. Too easy to avoid if one knows how. Mara nodded. It does not feel like securing the road, she said. It feels like waiting. Alina laid her hands on the table. Then they are waiting for something. Or for someone, Mara added. The room became still. Alina knew this was not a breakthrough. It was a first look behind the line. But it was enough to understand that the road east was neither empty nor watched by accident. Good, she said finally. That is enough for today. Mara leaned back. That was the easy part. Alina nodded. I know. When the two had gone, she remained alone in the writing room. The letters lay before her. The map was not here, but it was in her mind. Roads, points, movements, things were beginning to connect. She pulled the blank sheet toward her and dipped the quill into the ink. For a moment she paused, because she knew that writing something down gave it weight. Words were not only memory, words were direction. To name something made it more tangible, but also more vulnerable. She wrote no names. Not Mara, not Leo, not Taren, though his name already lived in her mind, carried there since she had passed the stables the day before. Instead, she drew small signs that would mean nothing to anyone who happened to find the page. A point for the mill. A short line for the path through the low brush. A small circle for the place where the bridge became visible before one reached it. Then she set a cross where Mara had said one noticed too late that one was being watched. The quill remained suspended above the parchment. The cross was small. It looked harmless. And yet Alina felt that it meant more than a mark. Someone out there was waiting. Not openly enough to be an order, not hidden enough to be an accident. Whoever watched those roads knew something about movement. Perhaps even more than Ardenthal itself. She did not fold the sheet. She let the ink dry and placed an ordinary letter over it, a reply to a woman from Dorfane who wanted to tell her husband that the well had been cleaned again. Two worlds lay one above the other. Above, daily life. Beneath, danger. Alina looked at her hands. Only days ago, these hands had sorted letters, broken seals, read names. Now they drew roads that might lead people into danger. She wondered whether her father had known this moment. Not this exact one, of course. But the instant when a decision was no longer only right or wrong, but both at once, depending on who paid the price for it. She thought of Arvid's words about bad decisions after bad years. Back then, he had stood by the window with his arms folded behind his back and had not looked at her while he spoke. Perhaps he had known that she could listen more easily if he did not watch how she reacted. Perhaps that had been his way of giving her room without making it soft. Now she understood him better than she wanted to. It was not yet a plan, but it was more than waiting, and that was enough to continue. The next day, no one spoke openly about the road to the bridge. There was no meeting, no formal account to the council, no protocol. What Mara and Leo had reported remained, for now, where it had been spoken. In a room with few people who understood that knowledge does not become stronger when it is shared too early. Alina went back to the writing room, took up the quill, and worked. She read letters aloud, shaped replies, kept her tone steady. People continued to come. Some wanted to hear, others wanted to speak. Many simply did not want to be alone with what they were thinking. But as she wrote, she felt that something had shifted. The questions were changing. They were no longer only about the state of the men at the front. They were about roads, about distances, about how long messages took, about what lay between here and there.
How long does a messenger need to reach the border? A man asked.
That depends on which road he takes, Alina answered.
And if he does not take the usual one?
Alina looked at him.
Then it depends on why he does not take it.
The man nodded, as if that was the answer he had expected. In the afternoon, she closed the writing room earlier than usual. Not officially. She did not leave the work undone, but divided it. 2 of the scribes took the remaining letters, a third tended to the replies. It was not a decision against her task. It was a shift. Alina went again to the map room. This time, Serafina was already waiting. The council asked why you were not in the writing room all day yesterday, she said.
And what did you say? That you were working?
Alina nodded slightly.
I am.
Serafina looked at her.
You move faster than they do.
They do not move. A brief moment passed.
What do you have?
Serafina asked. Alina stepped to the table and placed her hand beside the map.
The bridge is watched, she said. Not constantly, but regularly.
Serafina nodded slowly.
That matches some of the reports. It is not a good place for control, Alina continued. Too open.
Too easy to avoid if one knows the paths.
Then why are they there?
Alina looked down at the map.
Because they want to be seen, she said.
Serafina was silent.
Or because they expect something,
Alina added. Serafina leaned back slightly.
What? Movement,
Alina answered.
News. Perhaps someone important enough to intercept.
The thought remained in the room.
You are thinking of your father,
Serafina said.
I am thinking of what one would do with him,
Alina replied calmly. One would not take him far at once. One would secure him. One would wait. One would see who reacts. Serafina nodded.
Then the bridge is not an accident?
No. Alina looked at the roads that led east out of Ardenthal. The known routes were marked. The others were not.
We need a second line, she said. A way around,
Serafina added. One that does not stand out. Serafina looked at her.
And who walks it?
Alina did not answer at once.
Not those we have already sent, she said at last. Not again. Not immediately.
Why?
Because they are part of a pattern now, Alina explained. If someone is watching, they remember who goes and who returns.
Serafina nodded slowly. Then you need others.
Yes. And where will you find them?
Alina did not look at the map, but toward the door. Not in the council. Serafina did not smile, but her gaze grew calmer. That much was clear. Alina left the map room again. This time, she did not go first into the courtyard, but to the stables. The smell of hay, leather, and animal warmth was familiar. The men who worked here were not loud. They moved with a calm born of habit, not serenity. An older man looked up as Alina entered.
Your Highness, I am looking for someone who knows roads, she said.
He nodded toward the rear stalls.
Then you are not looking for me,
Alina went on. There stood a man who did not react at once when she approached. He was busy checking a harness, tightening straps, releasing them again, testing the buckles.
You were not on the list,
Alina said. He looked up. No. Why? Because I am not needed. That is not true. He held her gaze. I drive wagons, he said. I bring things from here to there and back again. That is not war. That is movement." A brief moment passed. "How far have you driven?" she asked. "Far enough to know when to turn back and when to continue." He shrugged. "That is not decided by the road," he said. "It is decided by who stands on it." Alina nodded. "What is your name?" "Taren." "Taren," she repeated. "I need someone who does not stand out." He looked at her. "Then you need many." "I need a beginning." Taren was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I will not go to the front. I am not asking that. I will go as far as I can return from." "That is exactly as far as I need you." He nodded slowly. "When?" "Not today," Alina answered. "Today they are still looking." Taren understood. "Then tomorrow morning," he said, "before the others." Alina nodded. When she left the stables, the master of stores was standing in the courtyard again. This time, he did not wait in the shadows. He stepped directly toward her. "You were not only in the writing room yesterday," he said. "No. And not today either." "No." He exhaled. "You are building something." It was not a question. Alina looked at him. "I am preparing. Without a resolution. With necessity." The master of stores shook his head. "You are drawing lines that are not on maps." Alina nodded. "The others are no longer enough." He looked at her for a long time. "If you are wrong," he said, "it will cost us more than we can bear." Alina held his gaze. "If I do nothing," she answered calmly, "it will cost us everything." The master of stores said nothing more. He stepped aside. Alina walked past him. That evening, she stood again in the West Tower. The valley lay quiet. The fields moved in the wind. Everything looked as it always had. But she knew that beneath that surface, things were shifting. Not visibly or loudly, but irrevocably. Below her, the first lights burned in the houses. Small points in the dusk, some bright, some faint, some barely visible behind closed shutters. Once, she might have seen in them only the end of a day. Now she saw people who did not know whether the order in which they fell asleep would still be the same by morning. She saw Henrik's mother, who had not slaughtered the black hen. She saw Ewald in the courtyard, speaking with a bandaged shoulder of a war larger than any rumor. She saw Mara, who did not want to look strong because strength sometimes meant only disappearing at the right time. She saw Leo, who had noticed the change before anyone spoke it. And she saw Taren, though she had not spoken with him for long, as a possibility already moving along the edge of her thoughts. It was strange how power did not always look like power. Sometimes it looked like a woman at the well who knew which path began behind the woodshed. Sometimes like a boy who mistrusted maps because he had walked the bad roads himself. Sometimes like a wagon driver who knew the question was not whether a road existed, but who stood upon it. Alina felt that she had to begin seeing differently. Not from above to below, not from throne to village, but from road to road, from voice to voice, from what people did when no one ordered them. Behind her, the door of the West Tower opened. Serafina entered without announcing herself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "The master of stores will not relent," the queen said at last. "I know. He believes he can slow you by reminding you of your role." Alina kept looking out over the valley. Perhaps he is right. About which part? That I have a role. Yes, Serafina said, but roles are not cages if one understands what they were built for. Alina turned her head. And what was mine built for? Serafina did not answer at once. Her gaze lay on the lights in the valley, and for an instant she looked older, not weaker, only heavier, but everything she did not say aloud.
"So that people may see a direction when they cannot find one themselves," she said then.
Alina was silent.
"You need not pretend that you are not afraid,"
Serafina continued.
"No one who is afraid themselves would believe you."
"But you must not let fear decide." "And if I decide wrongly?" "Then you will have to live with it." It was not a comforting answer. That was precisely why it was useful. Alina looked out again. The Arden River was barely visible in the last light. Only in places did it catch the sky and carry it as a dull line through the valley.
"I always thought leadership began with the right to command,"
she said quietly. Serafina gave the smallest shake of her head.
"Leadership begins when others realize that you remain standing even when a command is not enough."
And for the first time since the day the lists had been read, Alina did not only feel that she was reacting, she was beginning to lead. Taren set out before the castle had fully woken. Alina was already in the courtyard when he prepared the wagon. It was no striking team. No banner, no special markings. 2 horses, a simple frame, sacks that looked like supplies. Nothing about it suggested that this road meant more than any other. "You go by the mill," Alina said. Taren nodded. "And not by the bridge?" "Not yet." He tightened the final strap. "If I do not come back, it will not be because I did not know the road." Alina looked at him. "You come back because you know when to turn around." He paused briefly, as if testing whether she meant it. Then he nodded. It was not a farewell that needed words. The wagon moved, slowly and steadily, and passed through the gate without anyone stopping it. Alina remained standing until the sound of wheels on stone faded. She had said farewell to people before, men going to the front, names she had spoken aloud. But this was different. This road had been set in motion by her, not as duty, as decision. She turned and went back into the castle. The writing room was already waiting. The letters lay on the table, the people before it. A woman clasped her hands together as if they might otherwise fall apart. A man refused to sit, though. A place was free. A boy tried to appear taller than he was. Alina sat down and began to work. She wrote, read aloud, answered, and yet part of her remained outside, on a road she could not see. She forced herself not to raise her eyes toward the door too often. She could not show that she was waiting. Around midday, Serafina entered. She did not remain standing long, but she stepped closer to the table than a fleeting observation would have required. "The council is growing restless," she said softly. Alina kept writing. Was it not already? Now it has a reason. Alina did not set down the quill. "What reason?" "You." The word remained calm, but there was weight in it. Alina wrote the final letter, scattered sand over the ink, and looked up. "Then they should learn to work with me." Serafina looked at her. "They will try to place you. They have always tried. Now they will try to enforce it." Alina nodded slightly. "Then we will see how far they get." Serafina remained a moment longer. "If they bind you, you lose time. Then they must not bind me." Serafina left without adding anything. The afternoon passed more slowly. Alina felt the hours stretch without anything happening that she could grasp. She continued working, but the words became heavier, because she knew that she was not only writing, she was waiting. When the sun began to sink lower, movement entered the courtyard. Not loud, not frantic, but perceptible. A wagon. Alina raised her eyes. It was not Taren. It was another wagon, one of the usual ones, loaded with wood. 2 men climbed down, spoke briefly with one of the guards, and went on. Nothing about it was unusual. Alina forced herself to look back at the parchment before her. Time passed. Then, shortly before the light in the room began to fade, she heard the sound of wheels again. This time, it was different. Slower. Heavier. She stood before anyone said a word. In the courtyard, Taren brought the wagon to a halt. The horses were sweating, not exhausted, but tense. Taren climbed down without haste, yet his movements were more focused than they had been in the morning. Alina stepped toward him.
"You are back early,"
she said. "Earlier than planned," he replied. "Why?" He glanced around. Not from fear, but because he had learned not to say everything in the middle of a courtyard. Not here. Alina nodded. They went into the rear passage, the same one she had used the day before. Taren waited until the door had closed behind them. "The roads are not empty," he said. "We knew that." "They are not only watched," he continued. "They are being used." Alina remained calm. "By whom?" "Not by traders," Taren said. "Not by people bringing something or fetching something." A brief moment passed. "Soldiers?" Alina asked. Taren shook his head. "Not openly." "What then?" He looked at her. "People who do not want to be seen," he said, "and still have to be seen." Alina understood. "Scouts," she said. Taren nodded. "And the bridge?" "It is not the goal," he said. "It is the point where they test who comes." Alina placed her hand against the wall, not because she needed support, but because she wanted to hold the thought in place.
"You did not go farther?" "No." "Why?"
Taren held her gaze.
"Because I was supposed to come back."
Alina nodded slowly.
"And if you had gone farther?"
He did not hesitate. "Then I would have had to decide whether I was seen or not. And you did not want to be seen. Not today." A brief moment passed. Alina felt the image in her mind change. This was not a loose front. This was a net. Not dense, not seamless, but present. "Good," she said at last. "That is enough." Taren looked at her. "It will not be enough for long."
"I know."
They returned to the courtyard. The master of stores stood there. This time, he had not waited. He had come. "You are sending people?" he asked without introduction. Alina looked at him.
"I am having roads checked."
"Without an order?" "With necessity." He stepped closer.
"You are playing a game you do not control."
Alina remained calm.
"I am trying to understand it. That is not your task. It is our only chance."
The master of stores looked at Taren, then back to Alina. "If this becomes known, we lose control." Alina did not answer at once.
"We have not had it for some time,"
she said then. The sentence remained between them. The master of stores said nothing more. He turned and left. Alina stood in the courtyard as dusk settled. She thought of her father, of captivity, of the roads between them. And she knew that every step she took now would demand a decision from someone else. Not at once, but soon.